Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Stefan Rabimov, and I'm a Senior Content Marketing Manager for Houzz Pro. Over the past 2 years of the pandemic, supply chain bottlenecks have wreaked havoc on manufacturing, leaving many interior designers dealing with material shortages, shipping delays, and frustrated customers. What was is not what will be, and pre-COVID timelines and budgets are no longer the reality on the ground. The tight supply chain environment is projected to continue into 2022 and possibly beyond. However, today, the three design industry experts that come from three essential areas of supply chain have joined us. The interior designer, Liz Goldberg, the purchasing agent, Mary Gorman, and receiver, Miguel Montalvo, will share with us some of the strategies for successful sourcing and client management techniques. Let's go around the room as each speaker introduces themselves as we dive deeper in how to deal with long lead times. Mary?
Hi, I'm Mary Gorman, and my company is COCO to the Trade. I have been a purchasing agent since mid-2017. So it's been 5 years and the business has grown. I've met hundreds of different designers, worked with hundreds of different designers, and the business is growing every day. And this last year, I've probably learned more than I ever thought I would learn about the business. And I'm happy to be here to share that with you.
Thank you so much, Mary. Liz?
Hi there, I'm Liz Goldberg. I'm based out of Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm originally from Chicago. I started my firm, Carolynleona, about 8 years ago. I named it after my grandmothers, Carolyn and Leona, who are both huge influences in my life growing up and taught me the beauty of the home and welcoming people into your home. That was stuck with me forever. I bring a different perspective to the Raleigh market coming from Chicago. We're not your traditional Southern designers. Our firm is, there's 3 of us at the moment, and the market is bustling. People are moving here constantly, and we're very busy. We focus in residential design.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Miguel.
Okay, my name is Miguel Montalvo. I've been a white glove delivery and warehousing business for about 30 years. So we service the metropolitan area, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, South Jersey, and I'm here to help designers give the last impression to the customer. So there's a lot of changes that have been happening with this industry, and I think that it's a good idea to talk about it so I can give you guys what we experience on this end.
Thank you for that, Miguel. And I agree. I think talking about what each of us is experiencing as part of the supply chain crisis right now would be a useful backdrop for this conversation. Why don't we begin by talking about the situation on the ground and each of your perspectives. Maybe Liz, as an interior designer, you can give us a little bit of how 2021 has been in terms of the supply chain for you.
Big challenge. 2021 has changed everything in our industry. It was the biggest disruptor yet. I think we've finally figured out how to navigate what we're dealing with, but it did take some trial and error there. We're finding pieces are back ordered for a year at this point. A custom sofa that used to take about 3 months now is up to about 30 weeks. And it's setting a precedent for our client from the get-go and reiterating it constantly of what the expectations are and how we're going to do our best to deliver. But there's going to be hiccups along the way, not just in the furniture, but also in the freight. There's many layers right now of challenges.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm curious, Mary, in terms of purchasing agent perspective when it comes to supply chain, how has your experience been so far?
Well, I probably have a list of about 150 different vendors that I work with. So it just depends, obviously, on the vendor. If they're offshore, the experience is not great right now. I don't have to tell people about the container situations, what it's taking to, get companies to deliver. The U.S. companies are taking probably, 3 times as long to deliver goods. But I'm finding that a lot of those companies are a better source of supply right now. And even though it's extended wait times, I'm finding it's a lot less damage and just getting to receivers a lot quicker.
Interesting. And we'll come back and unpack a lot of things that Liz and Mary, you mentioned. But before we do that, Miguel, can you give us your take on how the receiving part of the supply chain has been dealing with the crisis this year?
Well, it seems like everybody is under a lot of pressure. So a lot of the merchandise we get here is unfinished. For example, if you're going to put a certain finish on a piece, it's not cured properly, it's boxed up. When they box items, they wrap it in a way that the finish gets damaged. So when it gets to me, I never used to have this issue where we would have to redo, like I tell our people, we don't want to remanufacture the product. We want to just make sure if there's an incident where it was packaged too tight, made a little dent, we could take care of that. But a lot of this furniture is coming here with missing hardware, missing glass, unpackaged properly, so that, they think if it's in a box, it's going to get here one piece. That doesn't mean anything. If it's in the box, it's got to be packaged properly. So a lot of companies are using freight companies. Freight companies are used to working with high-lows and machinery that they just handle it in a way that just damage everything. So that's what I'm faced with. Not every single piece is damaged.
It's incredible to hear kind of the layered amount of issues that each of you have to deal with. But of course, we're here to share some of the solutions with our listeners in terms of how to do successful sourcing and how to deal with client anxiety. But of course, I think it would be curious for everybody on this webinar to understand why are markets currently fluctuating and how can one source products and control some of these rising costs, just as part of the beginning of the solutions that we'll provide. Liz, maybe you can help us answer this specific question.
So we have been finding that prices are changing constantly, and we have to stay on our game as far as pricing, especially when we're working with Mary, our purchasing agent, or if we go direct to a vendor, the price could change the next day. At our firm, it's about 6 to 8 weeks when we do a full house design from the beginning to our presentation. And so when we're sourcing along the way and gathering all our data, we have to now go back and check right before our presentation to make sure we're accurate and explain to the client during the presentation that these prices could change. This is where they are right now, and the piece might not even be available at the date that we're quoting at this point because those are being moved as well. So it's just staying on top of that communication with our vendors, with our purchasing agent, with our client, and constantly checking ourselves.
And when it comes to these kind of inflation issues that we're hearing and growing costs, what does it mean for the near-term future for interior designers? As you look ahead into the next quarter or the first half of next year, where do things will stand?
We're seeing so many surcharges right now. Price increases, surcharges, it's constant. I don't think that's going to stop in the near future. When we were at our last High Point market, we're trying to gather information from vendors. No one had a clear answer as to when this is going to change. So we're just holding on tight right now, trying to keep constant communication, as I mentioned, and knowing that the vendor's doing what they have to do to survive as well. And so there's a reason for these price increases.
And Mary, you deal with 150 plus vendors on a regular basis. What are you hearing from them? Why are these prices fluctuating?
Well, it comes down to one thing. I keep in close touch with several of my sales reps, and, I've had this discussion time and time again with them, and they all say it comes down to labor. There's a labor crisis globally, not even just in our country. And it's just a trickle down effect. We probably have received at least 25 emails in the last week from vendors telling us that January 1, prices are going up. And, some of them are 15%, 16%, plus they'll be adding back in surcharges. So a lot of companies this past year raised their prices and gave you a surcharge, whether it be 5%, 8%, 10%. And then they repriced things again higher, but included the surcharges in there. Now they're going to price things even higher and again add the surcharge. So I can't imagine how much even pricing things as a stocking dealer. I think the cost is high sometimes. I look at it, but it's. I don't think we're going to see that change at all in the near future.
I mean, I think all of this begs the question: how do you deal with the sticker shock element of communicating that to a client?
Yeah. Well, I think, and Liz, tell me what you think. So not so long ago, designers were dealing with, can you give me a discount? Give me a discount. Give me a discount constantly, right? Mm-hmm. I have seen that kind of go by the wayside. I'm just curious on the designer side. Have you seen that somewhat move away?
Yes, I don't hear that anymore at all, actually.
Yeah. So that's good for designers, right? I think the shift from where the designer used to be as far as their business and, their role with their clients, this whole pandemic is shifting that a little bit back the other way, which ultimately could be a good thing once we come out of this.
Yeah, that's such a great point of view. I haven't even looked at it so specifically, but I would agree with you there.
Yeah.
But I would imagine still clients are shocked by these rises in prices. And Liz, how do you deal with that kind of a surprise effect and managing those client expectations?
So when we walk in a door to meet with a new client or a new prospect, we always ask for what the budget is, or a range if they're not comfortable giving a specific number. And we can be very clear right now in letting them know we don't think this number is going to get you to where you want to go. If we eliminated these items or this part of the scope of work, then we could stay within your budget. But the way the world is, the way the products are shipping, the way the price increases are, we're just very clear from the beginning how far their money will take them.
And of course, beyond prices, there's a levels of client anxiety right now because there's long lead times, there's price fluctuations, there's issues on returns and refunds on products that Miguel was talking about that are damaged during shipping. Can you talk a little bit about ways you are reducing client anxiety?
Yes. So we've started, it's probably been a good year now, if not a little longer, sending out a Friday email to our clients with updates. It's a weekly update of what's happening, what we've seen. If there's nothing new, then we just say, we hope you're having a great week, and we reiterate maybe like your next install is coming up in 2 weeks, or share the good news, share the progress. But it's a great time to check in. So there's no big, sticky, scary moments for the client when we do get a delay of another 6 months on a piece they've been waiting on. I think that, I think just keeping your client in the loop and letting them know we're doing the best we can, we're constantly reaching out to vendors and trying to stay on top of it, we're advocating for them, is necessary right now more than it has been.
You talked about kind of the weekly communication and just, staying on top of that. Can you give some specific examples of, I don't know, sentences you use, wording that can really help interior designers be more authentic about that communication?
Yeah, I think that it's trying to put yourself in the client's shoes. And, we're we're disappointed to let you know, or we're sorry to let you know that this item has been pushed out. We're going to stay on top of this and reach back out to you when we have another update, and just let them know what our role is here, that we're not losing sight of their items, that we want them to get their items as soon as possible, and we're on it.
I had a contractor send me screenshots of his communication with the vendor.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's a good practice?
I don't like mixing our clients and our vendors. I think that gets pretty sticky.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't do that.
Yeah, I hear you. And I wonder, Mary, talking from your perspective as a purchasing agent, obviously it's a trickle down effect, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as designers are dealing with clients, you dealing with designers, how are you communicating and managing their anxiety as they're
Sure.
dealing with their own clients? Yeah.
So we have set up a logistics tracking sheet, which we forward to every designer once they place an order with us. And I have somebody on my staff that specifically works on this logistics sheet. She's in constant contact with vendors, and she's constantly updating it. I do get the occasional, I have to say, designers have been great about not even questioning, when something is back ordered yet again. Although I do get the occasional email with the designer asking me, can you specifically tell me why this item has been back ordered? Which I think is a pretty comical question. And, I will then ask Sarah, who does logistics, can you call the customer service and ask them if they have any specific reason why this item is back ordered. But really, on the whole, all the orders we place, designers have been very understanding. The only other aspect of the process, they get asked to cancel orders by their clients. A lot of, so we have typically, I always had on my invoices all sales final, but I would absolutely cancel orders where necessary, barring that they're custom orders, obviously. But so through this past year, that became very ramped up. We constantly were asked to cancel orders. And so it pained me to do it, but I finally had to say, well, okay, I can cancel your order, but you have to pay the commission, because it takes more time than processing orders to cancel orders, and we pay for everything up front. So then we would have to be credited, and some companies, it's not easy to get your money credited. So it's created a lot of extra work, but we do try and keep those tracking dates as up to date as possible.
And I know, Miguel, you're still with us on the line. I'd love to hear your take on when there are mistakes in orders, and how do you deal with those kind of costly mistakes on your end?
Well, I'm listening to you guys talk, and I have a comment on the customer. I've been around a long time. So let's picture we're running a race, right? And when you're running a race, you have all of the runners pretty close, right? So they're like a second, a half a second next to each other. Same as the customer of yesterday. When it comes to budget, when it comes to understanding the process, when it comes to communicating with you guys, which you have a crazy hard job. Now, and it's manageable because it's pretty much all the same temperament, all the same expectations. Now, what I've seen in customers, you have a small group that are way ahead of the pack, where now, when it comes to the money, you have to add surcharges, you have to add this, you have to add that. It really doesn't faze them, as now where the main group of people, it's like you saw somebody when you throw in a surcharge and they get kind of escalated. So that's just a comment on the customer of today, right? So what was your question? I didn't want to forget that part. So you guys,
I was just curious, when there are mistakes on, from the ordering of specific, items, how do you deal with that on your end? Because you have to return the item or you have to repackage it and send it back. Like, how do you deal with these costly mistakes?
Well, on my side, when we open up an item and it passes an inspection, we're assuming that the customer is going to accept it. If the customer doesn't accept it and we have to do a return, now we have to find a way of packaging it so that it gets sent back. And then the struggle is getting them to come send somebody to take it back. Mm-hmm. So those are my experiences. When it comes to returns for you guys, very difficult. But I can't control what the customer's expectation is. If something is ordered wrong or not to their liking,
I understand.
I just do it. Yeah.
Mary, maybe you can talk a little bit about, when there are mistakes in orders, how do you deal with that on your end?
Well, I'm happy to say that we have very few mistakes. I mean, we have made mistakes, obviously, but it's not often. And, I will always eat that if it's a mistake on our end. And honestly, doing this for 5 years, I could probably count on one hand the number of mistakes that designers have made. It just doesn't happen that often at all, fortunately. We could talk about claims in a little bit and how that comes into the process. But fortunately, designer mistakes, if it's their mistake, they have to eat it sometimes. Some vendors will take things back at a restocking charge and shipping. But for me, it really, really doesn't happen often.
So a lesson here to distill that at the time of supply chain issues and long lead times, triple checking of what you're ordering is really essential. Oh. So you're really avoiding those mistakes because they're super costly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you want to walk us through your best practices as a purchasing agent? I see you have here a kind of outline process for quotes and orders, and I just want to make sure we cover that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so obviously, if you want me to quote you, I need to have your resale tax certificate first and foremost, because my main concern is protecting the trade. So I want to make sure you're a verified interior designer. And I tell people that they can send us over simply information in an email, as long as they include, vendor name, item number, all the information we need to give them their quote. Some designers will send me over an Excel spreadsheet, a Google sheet, but that process then will generate a quote on our end. And then the designer will shoot us over, typically, which we prefer, a purchase order outlining what items they would like to purchase. And we will then send them over the proposal, which they can pay through. They can either pay through the proposal, send a check, Zelle me, and then we'll place the order. Once we place the order, it then generates the tracking sheet that we spoke about earlier. Mm-hmm. They will receive that tracking sheet, and when something ships, it will be updated with tracking information and will fall onto their closed orders. It's all pretty seamless. If there's a claim issue, I have somebody on my staff dedicated solely to doing claims. She's awesome. She fights for every $10 that she can get for the designer and for me. Right now we probably have, I looked at it yesterday, we have over 100 outstanding claims right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So some vendors obviously are very simple to close a claim. Others, not so much.
Mary, could you give us an example of best practices of working with designers in terms of like what to do and what not to do when it comes to ordering?
What to do and what not to do. Okay. Number one, So a lot of designers have accounts with vendors themselves. And I've had in the past issues where a designer will call up their local rep and ask them for information and then purchase through me. That is a big no-no. First of all, you're wasting your rep's time. Newbie designers don't necessarily understand this concept, but, it's just like going to a showroom and taking up the time of somebody working in that particular showroom and then, ordering through me or another purchasing agent. That to me is, I've almost lost a couple of accounts actually because of that happening. But I think the industry now recognizes that purchasing agents are not going away, and they're a very integral part of the industry at this point. The model seems to be changing a little bit. Retail is dwindling. So that's at the top of my list. Yeah.
All right. I think you've covered a lot of ground. I'm curious, of course, to hear the interior designer perspective. Liz, could you share some of your best practices of working with purchasing agents?
Yeah, so Mary is the purchasing agent that we work with. We've gotten to know her team, and they're excellent, and they know our team. And we typically, when we're sourcing, we'll send an email list for pricing and lead times, knowing that could change along the way. But that gives us a good baseline of, is this in reality for this client? And can we put this on this presentation? And then from there, as time goes by, we button that up before we go to present to make sure everything is still as tight as it can be. Then when we're ready to place an order, Michelle from my team will contact Mary's team with our purchase order and review any specific details, especially if it's going to be custom made. I think we've really have a good back and forth. It's a pretty clean, organized system. Mary does send out the Google spreadsheet that Michelle manages all those dates.
I'm curious, has long lead times and kind of 2021 in any way disrupted or changed that process for you, or maybe some additional steps came in or changed?
Yeah, I don't think we used to have to nitpick the lead times like we did in the past. We could, okay, Mary quoted us, this is going to ship in October, and we felt confident this would ship in October, but now it's all over the board. And so we're really tightening up what we're telling clients as far as lead times are. Sometimes we're adding, 2 weeks to a month on top of what we're being told, just to allow for that extra time in transit or another delay.
And we also add 2 weeks to a month onto the tracking sheet.
Good.
Here you go. It's all about buffering. I think
managing those expectations and relationships. The relationships, like Mary was saying, with our vendors, and our vendors typically work on commission, and it's all about relationships in this industry.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder, Miguel, on your end, do you add any buffer time as you communicate things to Mary?
On my end, how I handle deliveries, we try to pre-schedule just to save a spot on the truck. But no, I really don't have issues with time.
All right.
I don't overbook our stuff. We always have just enough to add, or if we lose something, we're not bad. I don't have those issues really.
I'm happy to hear that. Can you talk a little bit about the best practices of working with you? What are some of the things that purchasing agents or even designers, if they work with you directly, that they must ensure they are doing to make things go smoother?
To me, a big thing that you guys can help with is side marking anything that comes through the door. And I know you guys try, but a lot of merchandise that comes through this door says MVN warehousing. I have no idea. We have a lot of designers here, so I don't know who it belongs to.
Mm-hmm. Can I speak to that?
Sometimes, sure.
Yes, please.
So we side mark everything. We put all that information on the PO. We put all that information if we're placing the order on a direct website. For whatever reason, vendors just don't translate it back to the order. I get calls all day long from trucking companies asking me when they can deliver. And I'm like, well, I'm not the person that you need to speak to, but here's the person, because it hasn't been side marked. So it's just,
Right.
It is what it is. I've talked to vendors. They just don't do it.
Right. You know what I do? Sometimes I stop it at the door, and before the driver leaves, I just call the shipper. Who does this blah 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 go to? Oh, that's for Mary Gorman or for whoever. And
Thanks for throwing me under the bus there, Miguel.
That was an example, but yeah, that's what I do. That's the hardest part about this job, keeping everybody's orders in check. So that's a big help.
It's essential. What I'm hearing is that the supply chain just requires the utmost logistical organization and detailing in order for it to be successful. So our listeners keep that in mind. I want to very briefly introduce Houzz Trade Program. The good thing about our trade program here at Houzz is that you have access to trade pricing, with some items up to 50% of consumer pricing that you can or don't have to pass it on directly to clients. Beyond that, there's a dedicated support team to help you source specific products, organize delivery, including the white glove, and other full service post-purchase support, including returns and refunds. And of course, with over 5 million product assortment options for you to choose from, I think that could be exciting place for you to browse as you consider options for your clients. I obviously want to bring up some of the Q&As that we had from our pros. And I think one of the biggest questions that I've heard is the outlook for next year when it comes to supply chain lead times and client anxiety. I know we briefly touched on that in the introduction, but I'd love to go around the room for you to give me a little bit of that crystal ball view for next year.
Okay, well, I don't think that's going to change in 2022. I don't think the supply chain issue is going to go away. Barring that we don't have, another terrible outbreak of COVID, it will start to improve. I've spoken to a lot of vendors who are taking steps to rev up their supply chains. Spoke to a sales rep the other day who is from a big manufacturer who said that they just bought an additional factory about an hour away from Hickory, North Carolina, because of the lack of labor force in that area. So an hour away, the labor force is a little bit more plentiful. It's been my experience that getting product, like I had said, from some of these larger manufacturers who have their own trucking companies really helps to get things to the receivers much quicker. We are now looking at lead times that are extending into June and July of next year. So you start ordering first quarter of 2022, you're looking probably at fourth quarter 22. So I can pretty much say with certainty that I don't think that's going to change in 2022, hopefully in 2023.
Wow, that's all I have to say to that.
Sorry.
Liz, what's your take?
Yes, I agree with Mary. I can jump right in there, and I'm seeing the same. We have to get creative in offering solutions to our clients in the meantime.
Yes.
So what we've done, we've partnered with a local furniture rental company that we've never had a relationship with in the past. And this year we've plugged them in quite a few times, and they've really saved the day. They offer styles, you tell them traditional, transitional, or modern, and they can come and rent by the week, by the month, drop off to your client a sofa while they're waiting for their sofa or whatever is necessary. And it gives them a really great solution in the meantime, so the family's not sitting on the floor or whatever the worst case scenario could be.
Yeah, I hear you. And very briefly, Miguel, I wonder if that background noise coming from your side, I hear hangers or something.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know what they're doing in my shop,
No,
but
no
my
worries.
office.
If you can mute, I'd appreciate that. Your make. But before you do that, it's your turn to speak. So I'd love for you to chime in terms of your expectations for next year.
By the way, I never heard that noise before.
Well, I hope everybody's okay.
It's great. I didn't think you would hear it either, but I'm sorry about that.
No worries.
Well, I agree with you guys. That's not going to change in 22. What I see in the trucking industry, the whole trucking industry, as you guys can see, drivers want this one. The labor force is weak, and the whole industry is kind of upside down because you have big companies buying up smaller companies and restructuring. So, I mean, it's pretty upside down. So I don't know. It's uncharted territory, but I see that it is going to be not settled in 22. That's for sure. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you for that.
I agree with you guys.
I think it's a good moment to bring up the issue of potentially sustainable solutions. I think our industry is always toying with ideas of how to be more sustainable, how to kind of look ahead. Is recycling or reusing some vintage furniture or options is another potential solution? I'm curious, Liz, if that's something you even consider with clients.
We do that more and more these days, having a piece reupholstered, but we do set that expectation that while we prefer to recycle or repurpose if we can to save pieces from going in the landfill, it doesn't necessarily save the client money. By the time you pay your workroom and they have to clean up the springs and the foam and the cushions, and you're purchasing the fabric, and if you want it to be treated and all the layers that go into it, it could be a wash, it could be more expensive. So it's not looking at it from a budget standpoint, but from the timing standpoint and from the environment standpoint, I think it's a wonderful solution.
I'm glad to hear that. And I don't know that if that's the case, but Mary, do you work with any vendors that are kind of working the sustainable or upcycled solutions? I'm not trying to put you on the spot here.
Yeah, I mean, I know some vendors do use a lot of recycled wood, but that's probably all I could think of right now. Some rug companies will use plastic bottles to, produce carpets.
Sure. Yeah, no, I've heard about that, but like I said, it sounds like there's a gap in the market, which for everybody who's listening, here's an opportunity.
Yeah. I do find vendors are doing more low VOC, lower toxin woven materials. I do think they're trying. I don't think it's as far ahead as it should be by now, but it's slowly inching up.
Absolutely. And I think it's in and of itself an entire new webinar topic, which I'm sure we'll get to. Let me ask you one more question. How does one build in a contingency for both the longer lead times and added costs for next year?
What we do when we set up a new project is we take a retainer, 10% of the overall design cost. And that retainer, they know, will go towards things like surcharges, overage and freight, overage and receiving, whatever it might be. And we share them, those line items, whenever those costs arise, and take it from that small retainer. So that way we're not constantly going back and asking them to open their pockets and making them feel uncomfortable that we're going to be coming back for more money over and over. So we have that small pot to go off of, which has been really helpful.
And Mary, is there a particular contingency plan for your work?
Well, I have so many lines of verbiage on my invoices, my proposals right now on the bottom about cancellations and delays. And yeah, it's kind of crazy. But I'm curious. I do have a question for Liz, though. Have you added any contingency clauses to your contract about longer lead times and, telling clients that they can't cancel because of those longer lead times?
Yes, exactly that. We have added through COVID So we joke, A, B, C, D. We joke that it's going to be like GG. It just keeps going what we've added. But we do. Every invoice says your invoice is not returnable. Nothing is cancelable. However, we'll make the exception of necessary if something keeps getting dragged out and we're able to reselect and find something that could come in sooner. We try to advocate for the client there. What we've done, though, is at the end of our letter of agreement contract, we've added a COVID-19 amendment page that explains in detail the supply chain delays and how we are not responsible. We are passing on that information. So hopefully one day that last piece of paper will come off that packet and we'll have to see it again. But right now that is helping us.
I love that. What a good practice to include that for next year, knowing where things will stand. I'd like to wrap up this panel by asking each of you a question. And that is, what is the most important or like the most pressing question on your mind right now as you're looking ahead into the future of the supply chain and your business?
I guess for me, is this volume going to continue? When COVID hit, I thought quite the opposite was going to happen. And, business has just gone off the charts, which is a great thing most of the time. So yeah, I'm trying to ramp up for 2022, a larger staff in anticipation of, even increased business from that point. But I'm just hoping to keep the business at the pace that we've been going in the future.
Makes sense. Liz, anything to add to that?
It's very similar. We've had the most successful year we've ever had. We've worked our tails off to do that. But I wonder as well, we've talked about bringing on another junior designer, but is it going to stay that consistent that we can really take that risk? Our market is gangbusters. The housing market's incredible. Will that be shifting? I wish I had the crystal ball.
I hear you. Miguel, you get the final word. What is the pressing question on your mind these days?
My biggest question would have to be, when do we expect things to go back to the way they used to be, where you could order something, it comes in when you planned it coming in, and with no damages, and it's a smooth story. That's what I want. I'm wondering, when is that going to come back? Sometimes increasing businesses where it's not going to be controlled, it doesn't do any good. I like steady and no hectic stuff. So that's my question. When is that going to come back? I like those days.
Thank you, everybody, for your amazing insights. And as I hear each of your experiences and insights today, it only underlines the fact that change is the only constant in the interior design industry, and it's here to stay, really. And thank you, Mary. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Miguel, for your fantastic insights. And for everybody out there listening, for all your project management, client management, and business management needs, please look toward Houzz Pro. Thank you so much.